I always say it's harder to see the whole picture when you're a part of it.
Veganism, the practice of abstaining from the use of animal products, particularly in diet, and an associated philosophy that rejects the commodity status of animals. Did you know that Black Americans are the fastest growing vegan population? Yeah, that's right. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be vegan. Stars like Cam Newton, Venus and Serena Williams, Ava DuVernay, Kyrie Irving, Chris Paul, they're all vegans, and many, many more. I read article after article about how reducing or eliminating animal products can help reduce the likelihood of developing chronic illnesses like diabetes and high blood pressure, illnesses that have plagued the Black community here in the U.S. And then I started to connect the dots of how racial injustice contributes to the poor diet that many Black and brown people eat. And that's when I reached out to fellow vegan and filmmaker John Lewis to hear his take on the rise of veganism in the Black community.
We all know that there are a lot of things that we fall into ailments of that could be changed by lifestyle. Medication is needed. We'll never say that medication is not needed, but not all medication is needed for every situation.
And now it's time for a vocabulary lesson. Food access and food desert. Well, what are they? Well, food access is exactly what it sounds like. Do you have access to food? This is something that many don't even consider, living their whole lives in walking distance or in close driving range to a grocery store or several. And now onto a food desert. Now these accumulate in neighborhoods not within a mile radius of a grocery store, leaving populations with just convenience stores or small markets, reducing available foods to the least healthy and fresh options. For this reason, these are more specifically considered nutrition deserts.
There's food almost everywhere, but there's no nutrition in the food itself. We went to the Navajo Nation. They have a population the size of West Virginia. They have 11 grocery stores. It's like, yes, they have all these convenience stores, but they have 11 dedicated grocery stores. Mm-hmm. And now you spread that throughout America, and then you start to see that it's disproportionately set in communities of color. There are clauses in a lot of these contracts that these supermarkets sign in which, say they sign a 20-year lease and they move out in 5 years. No other grocery store can occupy that building for the rest of that lease. So they take away the healthy food that they had, move even further away from that community that's used to buying their food, and they won't allow anybody else to go into that building that's already set up as a grocery store.
And isn't it like 8% of African Americans live close
to a grocery store?
Yeah.
Right. Isn't that crazy?
Right.
By the USDA's definition, 19 million people in America live in a food desert. Now, this food insecurity has a high correlation with increased diabetes rates. For example, back in 2009, Chicago's death rate from diabetes in a food desert was twice that of areas with access to grocery stores. And a decade later, despite an increase in the total number of supermarkets in Chicago, food deserts and food inequity persists, as these new stores popped up in areas already rich with healthy and nutritious options. In 2018, Black Americans made up approximately 1/3 of Chicago's general population, but almost 80% of the population of persistently low or volatile food access areas. Now consider the examples I mentioned before. Celebrities and millionaires who no doubt have no trouble accessing or affording clean, healthy food, but their switching to veganism has shined a light on disproportionate food access as well as obvious health benefits, of which diverse representation is so hard to come by. Even our editor working on this project using a stock footage website could only find one clip of a Black man with healthy, nutritious food, as opposed to the pages of white people buying, making, and enjoying healthy foods. And those celebrities and public figures, their push for awareness, well, it might be working. According to a January 2020 poll, 31% of non-white Americans had reduced their meat consumption in the past year, compared to only 19% of white Americans. John's new documentary, They're Trying to Kill Us, explores the connections between diet, poverty, and systemic racism, discovering the ramifications of poor diets on a global scale.
A lot of people, they miss the big factor of all the land that is wiped out, all the CO2 that is produced from producing all these animals for ingestion. For instance, we talked to a hog farmer. He has 3 of these lagoons on one property, which lagoons basically capture all of the pig waste. But you got to imagine, there's so many farms: cow farms, pig farms, frog farms, everything. When people eat all these things, there's farms that they come from. Each lagoon holds 6 million gallons of pig waste. Nobody's buying pig waste. So what do they do with that? They spray that pig waste over what they call spray fields. But the wind, nature picks up this pig waste and blows it all over everyone that's at least in a 5-mile radius, if not more. We looked at people's houses and swabbed like their ovens and their stoves and their toys and their walls, and they all had pig feces on the walls and on the stoves, and they're breathing this. So when people are like, oh, if you're vegan, you don't care about humans, it's like, no, that's just one part. And then the climate change, the CO2 emission that's coming out of this, imagine that, 6 million gallons. And he's got 3 of these lagoons, not 1, 3.
Now, like a lot of things lately, these issues can seem overwhelming. Coming out of one of the most momentous years in the history of civil discourse, social justice, and making real strides towards systemic change. But how can we keep moving forward?
Never stop. We've fallen into this situation where we always are so animated and so vocal the first 2 months of whatever movement, and then after 2 months we move on to the next thing. Pain is where the change comes in at. I think a lot of times we live so much in our blissful state that we don't have any empathy. We don't see the cause and effect of our actions, of how it affects somebody else. Like, our buying power affects another community. You know, we need to see all of this. Our health is impacted by it. So it's for everyone's individual health, the community's health, our neighbors' health, our planet's health. It's for everyone's health.